You know that feeling, right? That little jolt of panic when you look down at your hairbrush or in the shower drain and you see a clump of hair that just seems like way too much. Your mind immediately starts racing. Is this normal? Is something wrong with me? It's genuinely alarming, and it can send you spiraling. Well, today, we're going to stop that spiral. We're putting on our detective hats, and together, we are going to investigate this very personal mystery to get to the root of what's really going on.
Okay, so let's get right to the biggest question, because honestly, everything else depends on this. The one clue that changes the entire investigation is figuring this out. Are you dealing with temporary hair shedding, or is it something more persistent, actual hair loss? And of course, the big follow-up question, is it permanent? The answer is a total game changer. It affects the cause, the solution, everything. By the end of this, you'll know exactly how to read the clues for yourself.
Before we can even think about identifying a suspect, any good detective knows you have to analyze the evidence first. And in this case, the hairs you're finding, those are your primary clues. And trust me, they are telling a story. So our first step is to learn how to read them. We need to get really clear on the difference between a hair that's been shed naturally from the root versus one that's just broken off somewhere in the middle. They might look the same at first glance, but they point to two completely different cases.
So, here's the absolute key difference. Hair shedding is an inside story. It's a sign of an internal process where the entire hair, root and all, has finished its life cycle and is let go by the follicle. Breakage, though, that's an outside story. It's almost always caused by external damage. Think heat styling, chemical treatments, that kind of thing, where the hair shaft itself just gets weak and snaps. One tells you what's happening inside your body, the other tells you what's happening to your hair.
Think of this as your personal forensic toolkit. Let's go through it. Pick up one of those hairs you found. First, check the length. Is it a full-length strand, about the same as the hair on your head? That's shedding. Or is it a short, random, uneven piece? That points to breakage. Now for the biggest clue, the smoking gun, really. Look at the end. A shed hair will have a tiny but visible white bulb. That's the root. It's proof it came from the follicle. A broken hair? Nope, just a split, frayed, or jagged end. And where are you finding them? Shedding tends to happen all over, pretty evenly. Breakage is often concentrated where you put the most stress on your hair, like where your ponytail holder sits. It's all starting to make sense, right? Shedding is internal, hormones, stress. Breakage is external, damage. All right, you've analyzed your evidence. You've confirmed you're dealing with genuine shedding, from the root. Now the real investigation can kick off. It is time to line up the usual suspects. In the dermatology world, we call these culprits the alopecias. And each one has a very unique profile, a signature way of operating, and a different motive. Let's meet our top three.
First up, we have telogen effluvium. I like to call this one the hit and run. This suspect is famous for its drama. One day you're fine, the next you feel like you're shedding handfuls of hair. But here's the really weird part. The actual crime happened 2 to 3 months ago. A big trigger, like a serious illness, major surgery, childbirth, or even a period of intense stress, shocks your system. And then, months later, you see the delayed reaction. But here's the good news. Just like a hit and run, this suspect doesn't stick around. It's almost always temporary, and your hair will fully recover once that trigger's gone.
Our next suspect is androgenetic alopecia, and this is the inside job. This one is totally different. It's not a sudden, dramatic event. It's a slow, quiet, long-term operation that works from within. It's all about a combo of your genetics and certain hormones. Instead of big shedding, what's happening here is a gradual shrinking of the hair follicles. They call it miniaturization. Over years, these tiny follicles start producing finer and weaker hairs, so you lose density. You'll see it in classic patterns, like a receding hairline or a widening part. This one is permanent, but the good news is it's often very manageable with treatment.
And our third key suspect is alopecia areata. This is a classic case of mistaken identity. What's happening here is the body's own immune system gets confused. It's like your internal security team misidentifies your healthy hair follicles as dangerous intruders and launches an all-out attack. This usually shows up as sudden, perfectly smooth, round bald patches on your scalp. The thing about this suspect is that it's super unpredictable. Sometimes the patches just go away on their own, and other times they can come back, maybe even years later.
Okay, so we've identified our suspects, and we know how they operate, but a great detective always needs to understand the motive. What's actually driving these conditions? Why do they happen? To get those answers, we have to go deeper, way deeper than the scalp. We need to zoom in and go inside the hair follicle itself to understand the amazing biological process that's getting disrupted, the hair growth cycle.
I want you to think of your hair growth cycle as this incredibly precise, finely tuned system just humming along in the background. Every single one of your hair follicles is its own little engine, cycling through different phases. But, as you can see here, this beautiful system is also sensitive. Big things like stress or hormonal shifts can be like a wrench thrown into the gears, messing up the whole delicate process. And the result is what we see on the outside.
So this system basically runs in 3 main phases. The first, and by far the longest, is anagen. This is the growth phase. On a normal day, about 85 to 90% of your hair is in this active growing stage. It can last for years. Then you have catagen, a super short transition phase where the follicle starts to shrink. And finally, there's telogen, the resting phase. The hair just kind of chills out in the follicle for a few months before it naturally sheds, making way for a new hair to start growing.
So, here it is, the motive for telogen effluvium, our hit-and-run suspect. When your body goes through a major stress, it basically goes into survival mode. It has to decide what's essential and what's not. And I'm sorry to say, hair growth is not considered essential. So the body slams on the emergency brakes and shoves a huge number of hairs that were happily growing in the anagen phase straight into the telogen resting phase. It just cuts their growth cycle short.
And this number right here shows you the result. Normally, only about 10 to 15% of your hair is in that resting phase, which gives you a normal shed of maybe 50 to 100 hairs a day. But after a big stress event, that number can jump to 30% or sometimes even more. So 2 or 3 months down the line, when all of those hairs that were pushed into resting decide to shed at the same time, it's a massive, alarming amount of hair fall. You're not actually going bald. You're just experiencing a huge wave of shedding all at once.
So who's the messenger delivering these orders? It's a hormone you've probably heard of, cortisol, the body's main stress hormone. When you're stressed, your cortisol levels go up. And what we're learning is that this elevated cortisol sends a direct signal to the command center of your hair follicle. It basically tells it to stay in the resting phase longer, putting up a do not disturb sign and preventing a new growth cycle from starting. And that explains the delay and why the shedding feels so sudden when it finally kicks in.
Now for the inside job of androgenetic alopecia, the motive is a different hormone. For people with a genetic predisposition, an enzyme in the body converts testosterone into a more powerful hormone called DHT. For some reason, the hair follicles on top of the scalp can be super sensitive to this DHT. When DHT latches onto these follicles, it sends a signal to shrink and to shorten its growth phase. And with every new cycle, the hair that grows back is a little bit thinner and weaker than the one before.
So, you've analyzed your own evidence, you've profiled the suspects, and you even understand their motives. You probably have a pretty solid theory about what's going on. But to really close the case and figure out the right plan of action, it's time to call in the professionals. So let's take a look at how a dermatologist officially investigates hair loss to get a rock-solid diagnosis.
Going to a doctor for hair loss can feel a little intimidating, but it really shouldn't be. This here shows you the systematic approach that experts use. It's not a big mystery to them. It's a process of elimination. They start with the broad clues from your personal story, and then they narrow it down with specific tests. Seeing it laid out like this can really help demystify the whole process.
Let's walk through what to expect. The investigation always starts with your history. The doctor will just talk to you. They'll ask when it started, about any triggers, your family history, things like that. Then they'll do a physical exam. They might do something called a pull test, where they gently tug on a small group of hairs. If more than a few come out, that points to active shedding. Then comes the really cool part, the trichoscopy, where they use a special handheld microscope to see your scalp up close. And if they need more clues, they might order some lab tests to check for things like low iron, or in rare cases, do a tiny scalp biopsy.
And this is what the expert sees through that special tool. It's like they're looking at a microscopic crime scene. On a healthy scalp, all the hair shafts are about the same thickness, and they grow in little groups. But in androgenetic alopecia, our inside job, they see a huge variety. Thick hairs right next to tiny, wispy ones. That's the classic sign of miniaturization we talked about. And for alopecia areata, they might spot these exclamation point hairs right at the edge of a patch. These are the definitive microscopic clues that crack the case.
So, with all the evidence gathered, the tests analyzed, and an expert diagnosis in hand, the investigation is over. The case is officially closed. But that is not the end of the story, not even close. Now we get to move from investigation to action. We look at the verdict, and more importantly, we map out the path forward.
For telogen effluvium, which is the most common kind of stress-induced shedding, the path forward is incredibly hopeful. This timeline is a fantastic roadmap for recovery. The really heavy shedding usually lasts for about 3 months before it slows down. Then, around the 6-month mark, you'll start to see and feel that early regrowth, little baby hairs. By 9 months, you should notice a real improvement in density. And for most people, they're looking at a near-complete recovery by the 1-year mark. The most important thing you need during this time? Patience.
So what can you actually do to help your body along this path? Well, the most important thing is to address the root cause that started all this. That means actively managing your stress. It means making sure your diet is packed with nutrients your hair loves, like iron and zinc. It means taking care of any underlying medical stuff. And on the outside, it means being super gentle with your hair. Less heat, no tight styles, to protect all those new, fragile hairs as they grow back in.
I absolutely love this quote because it totally reframes how we look at this. Think about it. When your body is stressed, it sends resources to what's essential: your heart, your brain. Hair is considered non-essential. It's one of the first things the body stops investing in, and it's one of the last to get that investment back. That makes your hair an incredibly honest barometer for your overall well-being. Seeing it recover is a true, visible sign that your entire system is getting back into balance.
And that brings our investigation full circle. But now, you're no longer just someone with a mystery. You are the lead detective. You have the knowledge to analyze the evidence, to see the patterns, and to understand the science. So the final question isn't just about hair anymore. It's about listening to what your body is trying to tell you. Now that you can read the signs, what is your hair telling you about your internal health?